The morning sun cast long shadows across the parking lot of Dell Children's Medical Center in Austin, Texas, as a weathered pickup truck pulled into a visitor's space near the back of the lot. The October air carried the crisp promise of autumn, with leaves beginning to turn golden on the oak trees that lined the hospital grounds. Inside, the truck sat a man in his late 80s, his silver hair tucked beneath a faded baseball cap, wearing a simple flannel shirt and well-worn jeans that had seen better days. To any passerby, he looked like any other grandfather visiting a sick family member, perhaps a retired rancher or mechanic from one of the small towns surrounding Austin. The guitar case in his passenger seat might have suggested he was a local musician, the kind who played at honky-tonk bars and county fairs for tips and the love of music. Nothing about his appearance would have suggested that this was Willie Nelson, one of country music's most beloved legends, a man whose songs had soundtracked the lives of millions of Americans for over 6 decades. Willie sat quietly for a moment, watching as families walked through the hospital's main entrance. Some carried balloons and stuffed animals, their faces hopeful. Others moved with the heavy steps of those carrying invisible burdens, worry etched deep in their expressions. He had called ahead, speaking with the hospital's volunteer coordinator, Patricia Williams, a kind woman in her 50s, who had been organizing musical therapy sessions for the children's ward for nearly a decade. "I'd like to come play some music for the kids," he had said, in his distinctive, gravelly voice, though he had introduced himself simply as Bill Walker, a local musician. Nothing fancy, just an old man with a guitar who thinks music might help brighten their day. Patricia had been delighted. The hospital always welcomed musicians who wanted to volunteer their time, understanding the therapeutic power of music for young patients dealing with serious illnesses. She had arranged for him to spend the morning in the pediatric ward, with no fanfare or advance publicity, exactly as Willie had requested. As he stepped out of his truck, Willie felt the familiar weight of his guitar case in his hand. The instrument inside was Trigger, his beloved Martin N20 classical guitar that had been his constant companion since 1969. The guitar showed every year of their journey together, worn smooth in places by Willie's gentle but persistent playing style, marked with the signatures of countless friends and fellow musicians, and bearing a large hole worn through the soundboard just below the strings from decades of fingerpicking. The hospital's lobby was a blend of medical efficiency and child-friendly warmth. Colorful murals decorated the walls, depicting everything from underwater scenes with smiling dolphins to outer space adventures with friendly astronauts. The floors were polished to a shine, and the air carried the familiar hospital scent of antiseptic mixed with the faint aroma of cafeteria food. Despite the cheerful decorations, there was an underlying current of tension that Willie recognized. The particular energy of a place where families face their greatest fears and hopes. Willie approached the reception desk, where a young woman named Jennifer Clark was busy coordinating the morning's activities. She looked up with a professional smile that became warmer when she saw his guitar case. "You must be Bill Walker," she said, checking her computer screen. "Patricia told me you'd be coming in this morning. That's wonderful that you want to share your music with our kids." "Just happy to help," Willie replied, his voice carrying the soft drawl of Texas. "Music's always been healing for me. Figured it might do the same for them." Jennifer's smile grew genuinely bright. Many volunteers came through the hospital, but there was something about this elderly man's gentle demeanor that struck her immediately. He had the kind of eyes that seemed to have seen both great joy and deep sorrow, and had somehow found peace with both. "Let me call up to the pediatric ward," Jennifer said, reaching for her phone. "Sarah Martinez is our head nurse up there. She'll take good care of you and make sure you get to meet all the kids who are feeling up for visitors today." While Jennifer made the call, Willie looked around the lobby. A young mother sat in one of the waiting area chairs, her toddler sleeping fitfully in her arms while she stared at her phone with exhausted eyes. An elderly man paced near the windows, his hands clasped behind his back, occasionally checking his watch. Two teenagers sat together on a couch, one with his arm around the other's shoulders, both looking worried beyond their years. These were the faces that had drawn Willie here, not just the patients, but the families who loved them, who sat in waiting rooms and hospital corridors, who needed reminders that they weren't alone in their struggles. Throughout his long career, Willie had received thousands of letters from fans telling him how his music had helped them through difficult times. Now, at 89 years old, he wanted to give back in the most direct way possible. "Sarah's ready for you," Jennifer said, hanging up the phone. "Take the elevators to the 3rd floor, and she'll meet you at the nurses' station. The kids are going to love this." As Willie walked toward the elevators, his boots making soft sounds against the polished floor, he reflected on what had brought him here today. It wasn't his first time visiting hospitals. He had done hospital visits before, usually with media coverage and official ceremonies. But this time was different. This time, he wanted to simply be present with these children without the complications that came with his celebrity status. He wanted to be just a man with a guitar, offering what comfort he could through music. The elevator ride to the 3rd floor was quiet, giving Willie a moment to center himself. He had performed for presidents in packed stadiums, had played at some of the most famous venues in the world. But somehow the prospect of playing for sick children felt more significant than any of those experiences. These young people weren't coming to be entertained. They were fighting battles that no child should have to face. If his music could provide even a few minutes of joy or distraction from their pain, it would be worth everything. The elevator doors opened to reveal a hallway that continued the cheerful theme from the lobby. The walls were painted in soft, calming colors and decorated with more murals, these ones featuring animals from around the world, each painted with careful attention to making them appear friendly rather than wild. There were also displays of artwork clearly created by patients, with handprints turned into flowers and rainbow paintings signed with careful, childish signatures. Sarah Martinez was waiting at the nurses' station, just as Jennifer had promised. She was a woman in her early 40s, with kind eyes and prematurely gray hair that she wore pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her scrubs were decorated with tiny musical notes, and she wore a stethoscope around her neck, like a badge of office. When she saw Willie approaching with his guitar case, her face lit up with the same genuine warmth that Jennifer had shown. "Mr. Walker," she said, extending her hand in greeting. "I'm Sarah Martinez, and I can't tell you how excited we are to have you here today. The children are going to be thrilled." Willie shook her hand, immediately sensing the strength and compassion that made her effective in her demanding job. "Please, just call me Bill, and thank you for making time for this. I know how busy you must be." Sarah led him down the hall, explaining the layout of the pediatric ward as they walked. "We have about 30 children here right now, ranging in age from toddlers to teenagers," she said. "Some are dealing with cancer treatments, others are recovering from surgeries or managing chronic conditions. We've found that music therapy really does make a difference in their healing process and their overall mood." They passed several rooms as they walked, and Willie caught glimpses of the young patients inside. In one room, a girl who couldn't have been more than 6 was sitting up in bed, coloring in a book while her mother read quietly beside her. In another, a teenage boy was working on a puzzle while connected to an IV drip, his concentration intense despite the medical equipment surrounding him. "We have a common area where we usually hold activities," Sarah continued, turning a corner. "It's where we do story time, art therapy, and when musicians come to visit. Some of the children who are feeling well enough will join us there. And for those who can't leave their rooms, we can often open their doors so they can still hear the music from the hallway." The common area was a large, bright space with windows overlooking the hospital's garden. The furniture was child-sized but accommodating to adults, with colorful beanbag chairs scattered around and several small tables for activities. One wall was covered with a massive mural depicting a peaceful forest scene, complete with rabbits, deer, and birds that looked friendly enough to be characters in a children's book. "This is perfect," Willie said, setting down his guitar case and looking around the room. "Cozy enough to feel intimate, but big enough for everyone who wants to join in." Dr. Michael Thompson arrived just as Willie was opening his guitar case. Dr. Thompson was a pediatric oncologist in his early 50s, with the kind of gentle bedside manner that made him beloved by both patients and their families. Despite the serious nature of his work, he had maintained an optimistic outlook that served him well in his challenging field. "I heard we had a special visitor today," Dr. Thompson said, extending his hand to Willie. "I'm Dr. Thompson, and I want to thank you for taking the time to come here. You have no idea how much this means to our patients and their families." Willie shook the doctor's hand, noting the calluses that suggested Dr. Thompson played guitar himself. "Actually, I think I do," Willie replied. "Music's been my medicine for most of my life. Figured it was time to share that medicine with folks who really need it." As word spread through the ward that a musician had come to visit, children began arriving in the common area. Some walked in on their own, others were pushed in wheelchairs by nurses or family members. A few came attached to mobile IV stands, their steps careful but determined. Each child's arrival brought a new energy to the room, and Willie found himself studying their faces, seeing resilience and hope alongside the evidence of their medical struggles. 8-year-old Emma Rodriguez was among the first to arrive. She had been battling leukemia for 6 months, and though her treatments had been successful so far, the chemotherapy had taken her beautiful long hair and left her with a pale complexion that made her dark eyes seem enormous in her small face. Despite everything she had been through, Emma moved with the bouncy energy that seemed to be the birthright of children everywhere. She was accompanied by her grandmother, Maria Rodriguez, a woman in her 60s who had been Emma's primary caregiver since Emma's parents had died in a car accident 2 years earlier. "Are you really going to play music for us?" Emma asked Willie directly, her voice carrying a slight rasp from her treatments but filled with genuine excitement. "That's the plan," Willie replied, smiling down at her. "What kind of music do you like?" Emma considered this seriously. "My grandma plays old country songs sometimes," she said. "She says they tell stories about real people." Willie felt his heart warm at her answer. "Your grandma sounds like a wise woman. Country music is all about telling stories. Stories about love and loss, about working hard and dreaming big, about the things that matter most in life." 12-year-old Marcus Williams arrived next, pushed in a wheelchair by his father, David Williams. Marcus had been born with spina bifida and had spent much of his life in and out of hospitals. But his spirit remained unbroken. He was known throughout the ward for his quick wit and his ability to make even the nurses laugh on their hardest days. "Cool guitar," Marcus said, eyeing Trigger as Willie lifted it from its case. "Is it as old as you are?" Willie laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "Not quite, but we've been together for more than 50 years. This guitar and I have traveled a lot of roads together." 50 years? Marcus's eyes widened. "Man, you must have some stories." "A few," Willie agreed, settling into one of the adult-sized chairs and positioning Trigger across his lap. "Maybe I'll tell you some of them while we make some music." Lisa Chen, the hospital's music therapist, had been watching from the doorway and now stepped forward to introduce herself. She was a woman in her 30s with a background in both music and psychology, and she had seen firsthand how music could reach children in ways that traditional medicine sometimes couldn't. "Mr. Walker," she said, "I'm Lisa Chen, the music therapist here. if you don't mind, I'd love to observe today. It's always fascinating to see how different musicians connect with our patients. Willie nodded his agreement, appreciating her professional interest. Of course, maybe you can help me figure out what songs these kids might like to hear. As more children gathered in the common area, Willie began to get a sense of his audience. There was 10-year-old Sophia Blake, who had been in a car accident and was recovering from multiple surgeries, her leg still in a cast, but her smile undimmed. 15-year-old Jacob Martinez, no relation to Sarah, had been dealing with a rare autoimmune condition that required frequent hospitalizations, but he had brought a small notebook that he was constantly writing in. 7-year-old Tyler Johnson had cerebral palsy and communicated primarily through gestures and expressions, but his eyes were bright with intelligence and curiosity. Each child brought their own story, their own struggles, and their own unique way of facing the challenges that life had given them far too early. Willie found himself thinking about his own grandchildren, about the innocence and resilience that seemed to be built into children everywhere, and about how much courage it took for these young people to face each day with hope. "Well," Willie said, strumming a few tentative chords on trigger, "I guess we should make some music together. Anyone have any requests?" The first song Willie played was "You Are My Sunshine," a classic that he knew would be familiar to children of all ages. His voice, weathered by decades of singing and living, carried a warmth that seemed to fill the room as he sang the simple but heartfelt lyrics. The children listened with the kind of focused attention that adults rarely gave to anything, and several began humming along by the second verse. Emma Rodriguez was the first to join in with her voice, her small, clear soprano blending beautifully with Willie's gravelly tenor. Despite the raspiness left by her chemotherapy treatments, her love for music came through clearly. Maria Rodriguez watched her granddaughter with tears in her eyes, remembering how Emma used to sing this same song while helping in the kitchen before her illness began. "That was beautiful," Willie said when the song ended, looking around at all the faces watching him. "You know, that song's been around for almost 100 years. And it never gets old because it's about something that never gets old. The love between people who care about each other." Marcus Williams raised his hand like he was in school. "My dad used to sing that to me when I was little and had to stay in the hospital. He said sunshine didn't always come from the sky." David Williams, standing behind his son's wheelchair, placed a gentle hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Still believe that," he said softly. Willie nodded approvingly. "Your dad's a smart man. Sometimes the brightest sunshine comes from the people we love, especially when we're going through dark times." Dr. Thompson, who had been quietly observing from near the doorway, found himself moved by the immediate connection Willie was making with the children. In his years of pediatric medicine, he had seen many well-meaning volunteers come through the hospital, but few had the natural ability to meet children exactly where they were emotionally. "What other songs do you know?" asked Sophia Blake, adjusting her position in her chair to accommodate the cast on her leg. "Do you know any songs about adventures?" Willie thought for a moment, his fingers absently picking out a melody on Trigger's strings. "Well, I know a song about being on the road, traveling from place to place and seeing new things. It's called On the Road Again, and it's about the joy of traveling and making music with friends." As he began to play the familiar opening chords, several of the adults in the room exchanged glances. On the Road Again was one of Willie Nelson's biggest hits, a song that had been featured in movies and covered by countless other artists. But if Willie noticed their recognition, he gave no sign of it, focusing entirely on the children as he sang about the joy of making music with friends and seeing new places. The song seemed to transport the children beyond the hospital walls. Jacob Martinez closed his eyes and swayed slightly to the rhythm, his notebook forgotten for the moment. Tyler Johnson moved his hands in what his mother, Rebecca Johnson, recognized as his version of dancing. Even the younger children seemed caught up in the song's infectious optimism about adventure and friendship. "I like that one," Emma said when Willie finished. "It makes me think about all the places I want to go when I get better." "Where do you want to go?" Willie asked, genuinely interested in her answer. Emma considered this seriously. "I want to go to Nashville and see where country music comes from. My grandma says that's where all the best singers go to make their dreams come true." Maria Rodriguez smiled at her granddaughter's answer. "Emma's always loved music," she explained to Willie. "Even before she got sick, she was always singing, always making up little songs about whatever she was doing." Willie's eyes lit up with interest. "You make up your own songs? That's wonderful. Would you be willing to share one with us?" Emma blushed, but nodded eagerly. In a clear, sweet voice, she began to sing a simple song she had composed about her grandmother's garden, with lyrics about flowers that grew stronger after storms and butterflies that found their way home even when they had to fly far away. The song was surprisingly sophisticated for an 8-year-old, with metaphors that clearly reflected her own experiences with illness and hope for recovery. "Emma, that's a beautiful song," Willie said when she finished, and his admiration was clearly genuine. "You've got a real gift for putting feelings into words and music. That's not something that can be taught. It's something special that some people are just born with." Lisa Chen, the music therapist, had been taking notes during the interaction. She had worked with Emma several times during her stay at the hospital, but had never heard the little girl perform with such confidence and joy. There was something about Willie's presence that seemed to bring out the best in all the children. "Mr. Walker," Lisa said, "would you mind if I asked you to play something a little more interactive? Something the children could participate in?" Willie nodded enthusiastically. "I know just the thing." He began playing "This Land Is Your Land," explaining that it was a song about how America belonged to everyone, rich and poor, young and old. He taught the children the chorus, and soon the entire common area was filled with voices singing together about purple mountains and wheat fields waving. During the song, Willie noticed that several children who hadn't spoken yet were mouthing the words, and even Tyler Johnson was making sounds that, while not exactly words, clearly matched the rhythm and melody. The song seemed to create a sense of community in the room, breaking down the barriers between patients, families, and medical staff. Dr. Thompson found himself thinking about the scientific research on music therapy that he had read over the years. Studies had shown that music could reduce pain perception, lower stress hormones, and even boost immune system function. But seeing it in action was different from reading about it in medical journals. The transformation in the room was palpable. Children who had been quiet and withdrawn were now animated and engaged. And even the worried faces of family members had relaxed into smiles. After "This Land Is Your Land," Willie decided to slow things down a bit with "Georgia on My Mind," explaining that it was a song about missing a place that felt like home. As he played, he noticed that some of the children had that distant look that came from thinking about their own homes and the lives they had been living before illness brought them to the hospital. "Music has a way of taking us places," Willie said as he finished the song. "Sometimes it takes us back to happy memories. Sometimes it helps us imagine a better future. And sometimes it just helps us feel less alone right where we are." 15-year-old Jacob Martinez finally spoke up. "I write songs sometimes too," he said quietly, holding up his notebook. "They're probably not very good, but they help me deal with all this." He gestured vaguely at the hospital room around them. "I'd love to hear one if you're willing to share," Willie said. "And don't worry about whether they're good or not. The best songs aren't always the prettiest ones. They're the ones that come from the heart." Jacob looked nervous, but determined. He opened his notebook and began to read a song he had written about feeling scared and angry about being sick, but also about the kindness of nurses and doctors, and about discovering strength he didn't know he had. The lyrics were raw and honest, dealing with emotions that many adults would struggle to express. "Jacob, that's powerful stuff," Willie said when the teenager finished. "You're dealing with some heavy feelings there, and you're doing it with real honesty. That takes courage." Sarah Martinez, who had been quietly observing from the nurse's station, felt her eyes fill with tears. In all the months that Jacob had been a patient, she had never heard him express his feelings so openly. There was something about Willie's gentle, non-judgmental presence that seemed to create a safe space for the children to be vulnerable. "You know," Willie continued, "some of the best songs I've ever heard have been written by people who were going through hard times. There's something about struggle that can make music more real, more meaningful. It sounds like you understand that already." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of 4-year-old Lily Patterson, who was pushed into the common area in a wheelchair by her mother, Amanda Patterson. Lily had been born with a congenital heart defect and had already undergone several surgeries in her short life. Despite everything she had been through, she had maintained the boundless curiosity that seemed to define 4-year-olds everywhere. "Is that a guitar?" Lily asked, pointing at Trigger with the directness that only small children possessed. "It sure is," Willie replied, immediately adjusting his communication style for his youngest audience member. "Would you like to see it up close?" Lily nodded eagerly, and Amanda wheeled her closer to Willie's chair. Willie held Trigger so that Lily could see the worn wood and the signatures that covered its surface. "Why is it all marked up?" Lily asked, tracing one of the signatures with her finger. Willie smiled. "Well, over the years, a lot of my friends have signed their names on my guitar. It's like a collection of all the people who have been part of my musical journey." "Could I sign it too?" Lily asked hopefully. Willie looked at Amanda, who nodded her permission. "I think that would be wonderful," Willie said. "Sarah, do you have a marker we could use?" Sarah Martinez quickly produced a fine-tip marker, and Willie helped Lily carefully write her name on a small empty space near the guitar's edge. The little girl's concentration was intense as she formed each letter, and when she finished, her face lit up with pride. "Now you're part of the guitar's story too," Willie told her, and Lily clapped her hands in delight. The gesture seemed to break down another barrier in the room. Several other children asked if they could sign the guitar as well, and Willie agreed without hesitation. Soon, Trigger bore the careful signatures of Emma Rodriguez, Marcus Williams, Sophia Blake, Jacob Martinez, Tyler Johnson, with help from his mother, and several other young patients who had joined the group. Dr. Thompson watched this interaction with professional fascination. He had seen many therapeutic interventions over the years, but few had been as naturally effective as Willie's simple gesture of letting the children become part of his guitar's story. It gave them a sense of permanence and importance that was often missing from their hospital experience. "Mr. Walker," Dr. Thompson said, "would you mind if I asked you a question about your guitar? I play a little myself, and I'm curious about its history." Willie looked up from helping another child sign Trigger's surface. "Of course. What would you like to know?" "It's clearly been well loved," Dr. Thompson said. "How long have you been playing it?" Willie's face took on the expression of someone remembering old friends. "I got this guitar in 1969, and we've been inseparable ever since. It's been with me for every album, every concert, every important moment in my musical life. We've traveled millions of miles together, played for audiences big and small, and somehow it just keeps getting better with age." Marcus Williams raised his hand again. "What's the biggest audience you've ever played for?" Willie thought for a moment. Well, I've played for some pretty big crowds over the years, stadium shows, music festivals, that sort of thing. But you know what? Some of my favorite performances have been in small rooms like this one, where I can really connect with the people I'm playing for. Emma Rodriguez, who had been listening intently to everything Willie said, suddenly looked at him with a puzzled expression. "You know, you remind me of someone," she said. "Your voice sounds like this singer my grandma really likes. She has all his records and plays them when she's cooking." Willie felt his heart skip a beat, but he maintained his calm expression. "Is that so? What singer would that be?" Emma scrunched up her face, trying to remember. "I can't think of his name right now, but he's really old like you, and he has long hair and plays guitar. Grandma says he's one of the best singers who ever lived." Maria Rodriguez, standing behind Emma, had gone very still. She was staring at Willie with growing recognition, her eyes widening as she took in his features, his voice, and the way he held his guitar. But she said nothing, sensing somehow that this moment was precious, exactly as it was. "Well," Willie said casually, "there are a lot of old guys with long hair who play guitar. Maybe someday you'll remember his name and you can tell me." Emma nodded, already distracted by something else. But the moment had created a subtle shift in the room's energy. Several of the adults were now looking at Willie with new attention, though none of them said anything that might disturb the magic of the morning. Willie decided it was time for another song, and he chose "Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain," one of his most beloved ballads. As he sang about love and loss and the passage of time, his voice carried all the weight of his 8 decades of life experience. The song seemed to resonate with everyone in the room, from the youngest children who responded to the melody's beauty, to the teenagers who were beginning to understand the emotions behind the lyrics, to the adults who had lived long enough to know both the joy and pain that the song described. When the song ended, the common area was filled with a profound quiet that felt almost sacred. Even the youngest children seemed to understand that they had witnessed something special, though they might not have been able to articulate exactly what it was. "That was the most beautiful song I've ever heard," whispered Sophia Blake, her voice filled with awe. Willie smiled gently. "Music has a way of touching our hearts in places we didn't even know existed," he said. "Sometimes a song can say things that regular words just can't express." Lisa Chen made another note in her observation journal. In all her years as a music therapist, she had rarely seen such a profound connection between a performer and an audience. There was something almost magical happening in the room, though she couldn't quite put her finger on what made this visit different from all the others. As the morning progressed, Willie found himself settling into a rhythm with the children that felt as natural as breathing. Between songs, he told stories about life on the road, about the power of music to bring people together, and about the importance of following your dreams even when the path gets difficult. His stories were filled with gentle wisdom and humor, and the children listened with the kind of rapt attention usually reserved for fairy tales. "You know," Willie said, tuning one of Trigger's strings, "I've learned something interesting over all my years of making music. The best songs aren't always the ones that make you happy. Sometimes, the best songs are the ones that make you feel less alone when you're sad or scared or confused." Jacob Martinez looked up from his notebook, where he had been scribbling furiously. "Is that why you write sad songs sometimes?" Willie nodded thoughtfully. "Exactly. When someone's going through a hard time, sometimes they need to hear a song that says, 'I've been there too, and you're going to be okay.' It's like having a friend who understands what you're feeling." Emma Rodriguez, who had been unusually quiet for the past few minutes, suddenly spoke up. "Mr. Bill, can I ask you something personal?" Willie smiled at her serious tone. "Course you can, darling. Do you have kids? And grandkids?" "I do," Willie replied warmly. "I have several children and quite a few grandchildren and great-grandchildren. They're scattered all over the country now, living their own lives and chasing their own dreams." "Do they know how lucky they are?" Emma asked, with the directness that only children possess. The question caught Willie off guard, and he felt his throat tighten with emotion. "What do you mean by that, sweetheart?" Emma shrugged, as if the answer should be obvious. "Well, they get to have you as their grandpa. They get to hear you play guitar and sing songs whenever they want. That seems pretty lucky to me." Willie was quiet for a long moment, thinking about his relationship with his own family, about the challenges of being a traveling musician, and about all the times he had missed birthdays and school plays and bedtime stories because he was on the road. "You know, Emma, I think you might be right about that. Sometimes we don't appreciate what we have until someone else helps us see it clearly." Dr. Thompson, who had been called away to check on another patient, returned to find the atmosphere in the common area even more relaxed and intimate than when he had left. Willie was now sitting on the floor with his guitar, surrounded by children who had arranged themselves in a loose circle around him. The formal boundaries between performer and audience had dissolved completely. "What did I miss?" Dr. Thompson asked Sarah Martinez quietly. "Magic," Sarah replied simply. "Just pure magic." Tyler Johnson, who communicated primarily through gestures and expressions, had wheeled himself closer to Willie and was now sitting directly beside him. While Tyler couldn't speak in the traditional sense, he was clearly following every word and responding to the music with his whole body. His mother, Rebecca Johnson, watched from nearby with tears of joy in her eyes. "Tyler seems to really connect with music," Willie observed, gently including the boy in the conversation despite his communication challenges. Rebecca Johnson stepped forward. "Music is Tyler's language," she explained. "He may not be able to talk the way other kids do, but he understands everything. And music it lights him up inside." Willie nodded, understanding. "Some of the best musicians I've ever known have been people who felt things so deeply that regular words just weren't enough. Music speaks to parts of us that language can't reach." He began playing a simple, repetitive melody. Nothing fancy, just a gentle pattern of notes that seemed to invite participation. Tyler immediately began moving his hands in rhythm with the music, creating his own percussion on the arms of his wheelchair. Soon other children joined in, clapping and humming and adding their own sounds to Willie's guitar. What emerged was a spontaneous, collaborative musical moment that belonged to everyone in the room. Willie provided the foundation with his guitar, but each child added their own voice to the mix. Emma sang wordless melodies. Marcus provided a steady clap. Sophia tapped her cast with her fingers. Jacob hummed harmonies. Lily giggled rhythmically. And Tyler created complex rhythms with his hands and body. Lisa Chen watched in professional amazement. This was exactly what music therapy was supposed to accomplish. The breaking down of barriers, the creation of community, the empowerment of individuals to express themselves in their own unique ways. But it was happening so naturally, without any of the structured approaches she usually used. "This is incredible," she whispered to Sarah Martinez. "He's doing advanced music therapy without even trying." The impromptu jam session continued for several minutes, with Willie occasionally changing the melody or rhythm to keep things interesting. When it finally came to a natural end, the room was filled with laughter and applause, and Willie felt a deep satisfaction that came from knowing he had facilitated something special. "That was beautiful," he said, looking around at all the faces. "You're all natural musicians. Music isn't about playing perfectly. It's about expressing what's in your heart. And you all did that beautifully." Amanda Patterson, Lily's mother, had been watching her daughter's participation with wonder. Lily had been unusually withdrawn since her latest surgery, barely speaking and showing little interest in activities that usually excited her. But during the musical collaboration, she had been animated and joyful, more like her old self than Amanda had seen her in weeks. "Mr. Walker," Amanda said, "I don't know what you did, but you've given me my little girl back, at least for today. She's been so quiet since her surgery, and seeing her laugh and sing, it means everything to me." Willie felt the familiar tightness in his throat that came when he was deeply moved. She's a special little girl, and she's braver than she knows. Sometimes we all just need a reminder of the joy that's still inside us, even when we're going through hard times. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of 16-year-old Ashley Thompson, no relation to Dr. Thompson, who had been undergoing treatment for osteosarcoma and had missed the earlier part of Willie's visit due to a medical procedure. Ashley was accompanied by her parents, Robert and Michelle Thompson, who looked exhausted from the long months of their daughter's treatment. "Sorry I'm late," Ashley said, settling into one of the chairs with the careful movements of someone managing pain. "I heard there was live music happening up here." Willie smiled at the teenager. "You're not late at all. We're just getting warmed up. I'm Bill Walker, and I'm here to play some music for you folks." Ashley studied Willie's face with the intensity that seemed to characterize many of the older patients, kids who had been forced to grow up too fast and had learned to look for deeper meanings in everything. "You look familiar," she said slowly. "Have we met before?" Willie shook his head. "I don't think so, but I've got one of those faces. People are always thinking they've seen me somewhere before." Ashley nodded, but continued to study him with curiosity. She was clearly trying to place where she might have seen him, but couldn't quite make the connection. "What kind of music do you like, Ashley?" Willie asked, hoping to redirect her attention. "Country, mostly," Ashley replied. "My dad got me into it when I was little. There's something about country music that just tells the truth, you know? It doesn't try to pretend that life is always easy or that everything works out perfectly. It just tells stories about real people dealing with real problems." Willie felt a surge of admiration for this young woman's insight. That's exactly right. Country music has always been about honesty, about the struggles and the joys that make us human. "What are some of your favorite songs?" Ashley thought for a moment. "I love Crazy by Patsy Cline and Anything by Dolly Parton. But my absolute favorite is Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain. There's something about that song that just gets to me every time." Willie's eyes widened slightly. He had just performed that very song earlier in the morning. "That's a beautiful choice. What is it about that particular song that speaks to you?" "I think it's the way it talks about love lasting even when everything else changes," Ashley said thoughtfully. "Like, even when people have to say goodbye, the love doesn't just disappear. It becomes something different, but it's still there." Robert Thompson, Ashley's father, placed a gentle hand on his daughter's shoulder. He knew she was thinking about her own mortality, about the possibility that her treatments might not work, and about the love that would remain, even if she couldn't. It was a conversation they had never spoken aloud, but one that hung in the air around them constantly. Willie felt the weight of Ashley's words and the courage it took for a 16-year-old to think so deeply about such profound themes. "You understand that song better than most people twice your age," he said softly. "That's a gift, being able to find meaning in music, being able to let it speak to the deepest parts of your heart. Would you play it again?" Ashley asked hopefully. "I missed it the first time." Willie nodded and began the familiar opening chords. But this time, as he sang about love and loss and the rain, he found himself looking directly at Ashley, singing the song as if it were meant specifically for her. The lyrics took on new meaning in the context of the hospital, surrounded by families facing uncertain futures and holding on to love as their anchor in the storm. The entire room was silent as Willie sang, even the youngest children sensing the emotional weight of the moment. When he finished, Ashley had tears streaming down her cheeks, but she was smiling. "Thank you," she whispered. "That was perfect." Emma Rodriguez, who had been watching Ashley's reaction carefully, suddenly spoke up. "Ashley, don't you think Mr. Bill sounds just like that singer I was trying to think of earlier? The one my grandma loves?" Ashley looked at Willie with renewed attention, her eyes narrowing as she studied his features more carefully. "You know what, Emma? You're right. There is something—" She trailed off, her expression shifting from curiosity to something approaching recognition. Maria Rodriguez, who had been keeping her suspicions to herself all morning, decided it was time to speak up. She approached Willie's chair and spoke quietly, so that only he could hear. "Mr. Nelson," she said softly, using his real name for the first time, "I want you to know that what you're doing here today, it means more than you'll ever know. These children, they need hope, and you're giving them something precious." Willie looked up at her, seeing the recognition in her eyes, but also the respect for what he was trying to accomplish. "How long have you known?" he asked quietly. "Since about the second song," Maria admitted. "I've been listening to your music for 40 years, but I could see that you wanted to just be Bill Walker today, and I thought that was beautiful." Willie nodded gratefully. "It's been wonderful, being just a guy with a guitar. Sometimes the simplest moments are the most meaningful." "Should I tell Emma?" Maria asked. "She's going to figure it out eventually. She's too smart not to." Willie considered this. They were well into the morning now, and he had been hoping to reveal his identity naturally as part of the experience. "Maybe it's time," he said, "but let's see how it happens." Meanwhile, Ashley Thompson was still staring at Willie with growing certainty. "Mr. Walker," she said slowly, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to tell me the truth." Willie met her gaze steadily. "What would you like to know?" "Are you really just a local musician named Bill Walker?" Ashley asked. "Because I'm pretty sure I know who you actually are." The room went very quiet. All the children who were old enough to understand the implication of Ashley's question were now looking back and forth between her and Willie, waiting for his response. Willie set Trigger carefully across his lap and looked around the room at all the faces watching him. Children who had welcomed him with open hearts, parents who had trusted him with their most precious possessions, medical staff who had seen how his presence had transformed their patients' day. "Well," Willie said slowly, a smile beginning to spread across his weathered face, "I suppose it depends on what you mean by just a local musician." Emma Rodriguez gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "You're him, aren't you? You're the singer my grandma loves. You're Willie Nelson." The revelation sent a ripple of excitement through the room. Some of the children were too young to fully understand the significance, but they caught the excitement from the older kids and adults. Marcus Williams let out a whoop of joy. Jacob Martinez dropped his notebook, and even Tyler Johnson began moving excitedly in his wheelchair. "Holy cow!" Marcus exclaimed. "We've been hanging out with Willie Nelson all morning." Willie held up his hands with a gentle smile. "Now, hold on there. I may be Willie Nelson, but I'm also still just Bill Walker, an old guy who loves making music with new friends. That part hasn't changed." Dr. Thompson felt his jaw drop. He had been in the presence of a music legend all morning and had never suspected. But, as he thought about it, he realized that Willie's true identity actually explained a lot about why his interaction with the children had been so natural and effective. This was someone who had spent decades connecting with audiences, who understood instinctively how to reach people through music. Sarah Martinez was shaking her head in amazement. "I can't believe Willie Nelson spent his morning in our pediatric ward," she said to Lisa Chen. "Wait until the rest of the staff hears about this." But Emma Rodriguez was looking troubled. "Mr. Willie," she said, using his real name now but maintaining the respectful tone she had used all morning, "why didn't you tell us who you were right away? Did you think we wouldn't like you if we knew?" Willie's expression grew serious as he considered how to answer this perceptive question. "That's a really good question, Emma. The truth is, I wanted to get to know all of you just as people first, without any of the complications that sometimes come with being famous. I wanted to just be a guy with a guitar who wanted to make music with you. But you're still the same person," Sophia Blake pointed out with the logic of childhood. "Knowing your real name doesn't change who you are." Willie smiled at her insight. "You're absolutely right about that, Sophia. I guess I've learned over the years that sometimes people treat you differently when they know you're famous. And I didn't want that to get in the way of us making music together." Ashley Thompson was still processing the revelation. "This is incredible," she said. "I've been listening to your music my whole life, and you just spent the morning playing songs with us like it was the most natural thing in the world." "It was the most natural thing in the world," Willie replied. "Music is meant to be shared, and some of the best musical experiences I've ever had have happened in rooms just like this one, with people who love music for the right reasons." Lisa Chen was frantically taking notes, trying to capture the therapeutic significance of what had just occurred. The children's excitement about Willie's identity had actually enhanced their connection to the experience rather than diminishing it. They felt special and important, but not in a way that separated them from Willie. Rather, in a way that made them feel like they were part of something memorable. "Mr. Willie," Lily Patterson said in her 4-year-old voice, "does this mean you're really famous?" Willie considered how to explain fame to a 4-year-old. "Well, it means that a lot of people know my songs and like to listen to them. But the most important thing is that I get to make music with wonderful people like you." "Are we going to be on TV?" Marcus Williams asked excitedly. Willie shook his head. "Nope. This is just for us. Sometimes the best experiences are the ones that don't get shared with the whole world. They're just special memories that we get to keep for ourselves." Emma Rodriguez had been quiet since the revelation, but now she spoke up with a mixture of awe and confusion. "Mr. Willie, if you're really famous, why are you here with us, instead of doing famous people things?" Willie felt his heart swell at the innocence of the question. "Because this is exactly where I want to be, Emma. Making music with people who appreciate it. Spending time with brave kids like you. This isn't a break from doing important things. This is one of the most important things I could possibly be doing." The room fell silent as the children and adults absorbed this statement. In a world where celebrity often seemed disconnected from real life, Willie's presence in their hospital ward and his obvious, genuine enjoyment of their company felt like a profound gift. Dr. Thompson stepped forward, still somewhat dazed by the morning's revelations. "Mr. Nelson," he said, "I speak for everyone here when I say that having you spend time with our patients like this, it's extraordinary. The impact you've had on these children in just a few hours is remarkable." Willie waved away the praise. "The pleasure's been all mine, Doc. These kids have reminded me why I fell in love with music in the first place." As news of Willie Nelson's presence spread quietly through the hospital, more staff members began finding excuses to pass by the pediatric ward's common area. Nurses peeked around corners, orderlies slowed their pace in the hallways, and even some doctors from other departments made unexpected visits to check on colleagues. But Willie seemed oblivious to the growing attention, maintaining his focus entirely on the children. "Now that you all know who I really am," Willie said, settling back into his chair with Trigger, "I want to ask you something. What do you think makes a song special? What makes music mean something to people? Jacob Martinez raised his hand eagerly. Is it because it tells stories that people can relate to? That's part of it, Willie agreed. What else? Emma Rodriguez thought carefully before answering. Maybe because it makes people feel like they're not alone, like someone else understands what they're going through. Willie nodded approvingly. Emma, that's exactly right. Music connects us to each other in ways that regular conversation sometimes can't. When you hear a song that describes exactly how you're feeling, it's like finding a friend who understands you perfectly. Ashley Thompson had been listening intently to this conversation. Mr. Nelson, she said, can I ask you something about songwriting? When you write a song, do you always know who you're writing it for? Willie considered the question thoughtfully. Sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. Some songs start out being about one thing or one person, and then they grow into something bigger. The best songs seem to take on lives of their own. They end up meaning different things to different people, all depending on what they bring to the music. Like Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain, Ashley said. I bet that song means something different to everyone who hears it. Exactly, Willie replied. That's what makes music so powerful. It can be personal and universal at the same time. Dr. Thompson had been observing the children's responses throughout the morning, and he was struck by how engaged they all were. Even the youngest children, who couldn't follow the more complex parts of the conversation, were clearly absorbing the emotional content of the interaction. There was something about Willie's presence that seemed to give them permission to be more open, more hopeful, more themselves. Mr. Willie, Lily Patterson said suddenly, tugging on his sleeve to get his attention. Will you sing the song about sunshine again? But this time, can we all sing it together? Willie smiled at her request. I think that's a wonderful idea, Lily. Everyone ready? As they began, You Are My Sunshine, Willie was struck by how different the song felt now compared to when he had played it at the beginning of the morning. Then it had been a gentle introduction, a way to establish connection. Now it was a celebration of the relationships that had formed, a communal expression of joy that included everyone in the room. The children's voices blended together in a way that reminded Willie of some of the most meaningful musical experiences of his life. Emma's clear soprano, Marcus's enthusiastic but slightly off-key contributions, Ashley's confident alto, Jacob's harmony, Tyler's rhythmic sounds, Lily's giggling interruptions, and Sophia's careful enunciation all combined to create something beautiful and unique. But it wasn't just the children singing. Maria Rodriguez joined in with a warm contralto that spoke of years of singing lullabies and folk songs. Rebecca Johnson sang softly while signing the words for Tyler, tears streaming down her face as she watched her son's joyful participation. Amanda Patterson held Lily close while they sang together, and Robert and Michelle Thompson harmonized with their daughter Ashley, creating a family moment within the larger community moment. Even the medical staff had joined in. Sarah Martinez was singing while continuing to monitor her patients. Dr. Thompson was humming along while checking charts, and Lisa Chen was singing harmony while taking notes on the therapeutic implications of the experience. When the song ended, there was a moment of perfect silence that felt sacred. Willie looked around the room at all the faces, children and parents and medical staff, all connected by the simple act of making music together. You know, Willie said quietly, I've played in some pretty famous places over the years, but I don't think I've ever been part of anything more beautiful than what just happened here. Emma Rodriguez wiped tears from her eyes. Mr. Willie, I don't ever want this morning to end. Willie felt his own eyes well up with tears. Well, sweetheart, the morning might end, but what we've shared here doesn't have to. Music has a way of living on in our hearts long after the last note is played. Marcus Williams had been unusually quiet for the past few minutes, But now he spoke up with the seriousness that often characterized children dealing with chronic illness. "Mr. Willie, do you think music can actually help people get better? Like, medically better?" Willie looked at Dr. Thompson, acknowledging that this was a question that required both musical and medical wisdom. "What do you think, Doc?" Dr. Thompson considered his answer carefully. "Well, Marcus, there's actually scientific research that shows music can have real effects on our bodies and our healing. It can reduce stress, lower blood pressure, help with pain management, and even boost our immune systems. But I think the most important thing music does is remind us of what we're fighting for. The joy and beauty and connection that make life worth living." Willie nodded his agreement. "That's beautifully put, Doc. Music might not cure diseases, but it can certainly help heal spirits. And that's not nothing." Ashley Thompson had been thinking about something throughout the conversation. "Mr. Nelson," she said, "I have to tell you something. Before I got sick, I used to take music for granted. I'd listen to songs on the radio or on my phone, but I never really thought about how they were made or what they meant. Being in the hospital has changed that for me. Music means something different now. It's more important, more precious." Willie looked at her with deep respect. "Ashley, what you just said is incredibly wise. Sometimes it takes going through difficult experiences to help us appreciate the things that really matter. You've learned something that some people never figure out." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Patricia Williams, the hospital's volunteer coordinator, who had been the one to arrange Willie's visit in the first place. She appeared in the doorway of the common area looking slightly out of breath, as if she had been rushing. Mr. Nelson," she said, clearly flustered. "I just heard... I had no idea when you called that you were... I'm so sorry if we didn't give you the welcome you deserved." Willie stood up and walked over to her with a warm smile. "Patricia, you gave me exactly the welcome I needed. You treated me like any other volunteer who wanted to share music with these kids, and that was perfect." "But if we had known," Patricia began. Willie gently interrupted her. "If you had known, this morning would have been completely different, and not necessarily in a good way. The fact that I got to just be a guy with a guitar for a while, that was the whole point." Dr. Thompson watched this interaction with growing admiration for Willie's character. He had seen other celebrities visit the hospital over the years, and most of them had required careful coordination, security arrangements, and publicity considerations. Willie's approach was refreshingly different, humble, authentic, and focused entirely on the patients rather than on himself. "Mr. Willie," Emma Rodriguez said, reclaiming his attention, "I have an idea. What if we write a song together? All of us, A song about today, about making music together and being friends." Willie's face lit up at the suggestion. "Emma, that's a brilliant idea. What should our song be about?" The children began calling out suggestions eagerly. "About being brave when you're scared. About friends who help each other. About music bringing people together. About finding sunshine on cloudy days. About how love is stronger than being sick." Willie listened to all their suggestions, his fingers absently picking out chord progressions on trigger as ideas began to form. "Those are all wonderful ideas. Let's see if we can put them together into something special." Lisa Chen realized she was witnessing something extraordinary: the collaborative creation of a therapeutic song by patients who had never written music together before. She began documenting the process carefully, understanding that this could have significant implications for her future work with pediatric patients. Willie began with a simple chord progression and a basic melody. "How about we start with something like this," he said, playing and singing. "When the world gets scary and the days seem long, We can find our courage in a friend's sweet song." "That's beautiful!" Ashley exclaimed. "What comes next?" Emma raised her hand eagerly. "How about, when we're feeling lonely and we don't know why, we can look for sunshine in each other's eyes?" Willie grinned and incorporated her suggestion into the melody. "Perfect, Emma. Jacob, you want to add a line?" Jacob thought for a moment before contributing. "When the road gets rocky and we stumble down, we can lift each other up and turn it all around." The song continued to grow as each child added their voice to the lyrics. Marcus contributed a line about finding strength in friendship. Sophia added something about hope being stronger than fear. And even little Lily managed to suggest that happy songs make sad hearts smile. Tyler Johnson, who couldn't contribute words in the traditional sense, was clearly following the song's development and expressing his approval through movement and sounds. His mother, Rebecca, spoke for him. Tyler wants to add that music makes everyone feel included, even when they can't say the words. As the song took shape, Willie was amazed by the children's natural instincts for storytelling and emotion. Their lyrics were simple but profound, honest but hopeful, and completely authentic to their experiences. "Okay," Willie said when they had worked through several verses, "let's try singing our song together and see how it feels." The resulting performance was imperfect by professional standards. Voices came in at slightly different times. Some children forgot the words they had just helped create, and the melody wandered a bit as people tried to remember their parts. But it was also one of the most moving musical experiences of Willie's long career. The song they had created together was about resilience and friendship, about finding light in dark places and strength in community. It was about their shared experience in the hospital, but it was also about universal human experiences of fear and hope, illness and healing, loneliness and connection. When they finished, the room erupted in applause, not just from the participants, but from the growing crowd of hospital staff who had gathered in the hallway to listen. Word had spread throughout the building that Willie Nelson was in the pediatric ward, but more importantly, word had spread that something special was happening. "That was incredible," Dr. Thompson said, and his admiration was clearly genuine. "You've just created something that didn't exist in the world an hour ago, and it's beautiful." Willie looked around at all the faces, taking in the joy and pride and sense of accomplishment that filled the room. "You know what? I think we should give our song a name. What should we call it?" Emma Rodriguez didn't hesitate. "We should call it the Hospital Song, because it's about all of us and this place and how music brought us together." "No," Ashley Thompson said thoughtfully. "I think we should call it Finding Sunshine, because that's what today has been about. Finding reasons to be happy even when things are hard." The children debated the title for several minutes, with various suggestions being offered and considered. Finally, Marcus Williams raised his hand for attention. "What if we call it Friends in the Music?" he suggested. "Because that's what we all became today. Friends who found each other through music." Willie smiled at the suggestion. "I think that's perfect, Marcus. Friends in the Music. A song by all of us, for all of us." As the morning began to draw toward its natural conclusion, Willie realized that this experience had touched him more deeply than he had expected. He had come to the hospital hoping to bring some joy to children who were facing difficult circumstances, but he was leaving having received far more than he had given. The energy in the common area had shifted as the morning progressed into early afternoon. What had begun as a simple musical visit had evolved into something much more profound, a shared experience that had created lasting bonds between Willie and the children, among the children themselves, and throughout the entire hospital community. Dr. Thompson approached Willie as the formal part of the visit was winding down. "Mr. Nelson," he said quietly, "I want you to know that what you've done here today goes far beyond entertainment. I've been working with pediatric patients for over 15 years, and I've never seen anything quite like this. You've given these children something they'll carry with them for the rest of their lives. Willie shook the doctor's hand warmly. Doc, I think it's the other way around. These kids have reminded me why I became a musician in the first place. It wasn't about fame or success. It was about connecting with people through music, about sharing something that makes life a little brighter. Sarah Martinez had been watching the interaction between Willie and her patients all morning with professional fascination and personal joy. As the head nurse on the pediatric ward, she had seen many well-intentioned visits from celebrities and volunteers over the years, but few had resonated so deeply with both patients and staff. Mr. Nelson, she said, joining the conversation, I hope you know that you're welcome here anytime. What you've brought to these children today, it's going to stay with them through their treatments, through their recovery, through whatever challenges they face. Willie felt deeply moved by her words. Sarah, it's been my privilege. These kids have shown me courage and grace that puts most adults to shame. If I can come back and make music with them again sometime, I'd be honored to do it. Emma Rodriguez, who had been busy helping Lily color in a book, suddenly looked up with an expression of concern. Mr. Willie, are you leaving now? Is this the end? Willie walked over to where she was sitting and knelt down beside her chair. Well, sweetheart, I do have to go eventually, but this isn't really an ending. What we've shared today, the music, the friendship, the song we wrote together, that's all going to stay with us. Emma's eyes filled with tears. But what if I forget the words to our song? What if I forget how it felt to sing with you? Willie reached into his guitar case and pulled out a small notebook and pen. Tell you what, Emma, why don't we write down the words to Friends in the Music so you'll always have them? And every time you sing it, you'll remember this morning and all the friends you made. The idea of preserving their collaborative song excited all the children. They gathered around as Willie carefully wrote out the lyrics they had created together, with each child helping to remember their specific contributions. When he finished, he tore out the page and handed it to Emma, but not before making copies for everyone who had participated. There, Willie said, now you each have your own copy of our song. And you know what? Anytime you sing it, even if you're by yourself, all of us will be singing it with you in spirit. Marcus Williams had been unusually quiet during this exchange, but now he spoke up with the matter-of-fact tone that often characterized children dealing with serious medical issues. Mr. Willie, what if some of us don't get better? What if we can't always be here to sing together? The question hung in the air with the weight of reality that surrounded all pediatric medical settings. Willie looked around at the faces watching him, children who understood mortality in ways that most adults preferred to avoid, parents carrying fears they couldn't voice, and medical staff who dealt with these realities every day. Willie chose his words carefully. Marcus, that's a really important question, and I'm glad you asked it. The truth is, none of us know what the future holds. But I believe that when people connect through music the way we have today, that connection becomes part of who we are forever. No matter what happens, no matter where life takes any of us, we'll always have been friends in the music. Ashley Thompson nodded slowly, understanding the deeper implications of Willie's answer. So our song isn't just about today, she said. It's about how music connects us across time and space, even when we can't be together physically. Exactly, Willie replied. Music has a way of keeping people connected even when they're apart. Every time you hear a song that reminds you of someone you care about, that person is with you in that moment. Lisa Chen had been documenting the entire morning for her research on music therapy, but she realized that what she was witnessing transcended any clinical study. This was about the fundamental human need for connection and the power of shared creative experiences to meet that need in profound ways. Tyler Johnson, who had been following the conversation intently despite his communication challenges, suddenly moved his wheelchair closer to Willie's chair and reached out to touch Trigger's worn surface. His mother, Rebecca, interpreted his gesture. "Tyler wants to feel the guitar one more time," she explained. "He's trying to memorize how it feels so he can remember this day." Willie gently guided Tyler's hands across Trigger's worn wood, letting him feel the smooth areas where Willie's own hands had worn away the finish over decades of playing. "Tyler, this guitar has been with me through every important moment of my musical life, and now it's been part of this moment with all of you. That makes today one of the most important days in its life, too." Rebecca Johnson wiped tears from her eyes as she watched her son's careful exploration of the instrument. Tyler had always responded to music more than any other form of communication, and seeing him connect with Willie and his guitar was deeply moving. "Mr. Nelson," Rebecca said, "Tyler has been in and out of hospitals his whole life, and music has always been his refuge. What you've given him today, the chance to be part of making music instead of just listening to it, it's incredible." Willie looked at Tyler with deep respect. "Tyler's taught me something important today. Music isn't just about the sounds we make. It's about the feelings we share and the connections we build. He's been making music with us all morning in his own perfect way." As the afternoon progressed, individual children and families began saying their goodbyes as they returned to treatments, therapy sessions, or simply needed rest. Each farewell carried weight, with promises to remember the morning and hopes to see each other again. Lily Patterson was among the first to leave, as she needed to return to her room for medication. As Amanda wheeled her daughter toward the door, Lily called back to Willie. "Mr. Willie, thank you for letting me sign your guitar. I'm going to tell everyone I know that I'm friends with Willie Nelson." Willie waved at her with a smile. "And I'm going to tell everyone I know that I'm friends with Lily Patterson, one of the bravest little girls I've ever met." Sophia Blake was next, her cast making mobility challenging, but her spirits clearly lifted by the morning's experience. "Mr. Nelson," she said, as her parents prepared to take her back to her room, "when I get out of this cast and can walk normally again, I'm going to learn to play guitar. Will you remember that promise?" "I absolutely will remember," Willie assured her. "And when you learn your first song, you'll have to play it for me." Jacob Martinez approached Willie with his notebook in hand. "Mr. Nelson, I wrote something during our time together today. It's not a song, just some thoughts about what this morning meant to me. Would you like to read it?" Willie took the notebook and read the teenager's reflection on the experience. Jacob had written about feeling isolated by his illness until music reminded him that he wasn't alone, about the power of creativity to transform difficult experiences into something beautiful, and about the unexpected joy of collaborating with people of all ages to create something meaningful. "Jacob, this is beautiful writing," Willie said, returning the notebook. "You've captured something important here about the power of music to heal and connect. I hope you keep writing. You have a real gift for expressing deep truths." Ashley Thompson was among the last to leave, and her goodbye carried particular weight. As a 16-year-old facing a serious cancer diagnosis, she understood the significance of the morning in ways that younger children might not fully grasp. "Mr. Nelson," she said, "I want you to know that meeting you today has changed how I think about my own future. Whatever happens with my treatment, I'm going to find ways to bring music to other people the way you brought it to us today." Willie felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Ashley, you already have everything you need to do that. You understand music's power to heal and connect, and you have the courage to share that understanding with others. That's all it takes." As Ashley and her parents left the common area, Willie realized that Emma Rodriguez was still there, sitting quietly with her grandmother Maria. The little girl had been unusually subdued for the past hour, and Willie sensed she was struggling with the transition from the magical morning back to the reality of her hospital stay. "Emma," Willie said gently, "you've been awfully quiet. What's on your mind, sweetheart?" Emma looked up at him with the serious expression that sometimes crossed children's faces when they were grappling with complex emotions. "Mr. Willie, I keep thinking about what Marcus asked earlier, about what happens if some of us don't get better. I'm scared that I might forget today, or that today might not matter if I don't make it through my treatments." Willie felt his heart break at the 8-year-old's honest expression of fear. He looked at Maria Rodriguez, who nodded her permission for him to address her granddaughter's concerns directly. Willie pulled his chair closer to Emma's and spoke with gentle seriousness. "Emma, I want you to listen to me very carefully. Today matters, not because of what happens in the future, but because of what happened right here, right now. The joy you felt when we sang together, the pride you felt when we wrote our song, the friendship you shared with all these other kids, those feelings are real, and they're yours forever." "But what if I die?" Emma asked with the directness that only children possess when confronting their deepest fears. Willie was quiet for a long moment, understanding that his answer would carry enormous weight for this brave little girl. "Emma, I don't know what's going to happen with your treatments. Nobody does. But I know this. The music we made together today, the love we shared, the connections we built, those things are bigger than any one person's life. They become part of the universe's song, and they never disappear." Emma considered this carefully. "So, even if I die, our song will still exist?" "Not just exist," Willie assured her. "It will live in everyone who was part of creating it. Every time any of us sings Friends in the Music, you'll be singing it too. Every time we remember this morning, you'll be part of that memory. That's how love works. It makes us part of each other forever." Maria Rodriguez wiped tears from her eyes as she watched her granddaughter process Willie's words. This conversation was one she had been dreading but knowing was necessary, and Willie was handling it with exactly the kind of honesty and hope that Emma needed. "Will you remember me?" Emma asked Willie directly. Willie leaned forward and looked into her eyes with complete sincerity. "Emma Rodriguez, I will remember you for the rest of my life. I'll remember your beautiful singing voice, your wise questions, your kind heart, and your incredible courage. And every time I play You Are My Sunshine, I'll think of you." Emma smiled for the first time in the past hour. "And I'll remember you too, Mr. Willie. Not just because you're famous, but because you made me feel important and brave and happy, even in the hospital." As Emma and her grandmother prepared to leave, Willie made a decision that surprised even himself. He opened Trigger's case and carefully removed a pick from the small compartment where he kept spare strings and other necessities. "Emma," he said, holding out the pick, "I want you to have this. It's one of my guitar picks. I've used it to play thousands of songs over the years. I want you to keep it as a reminder that you're part of the music now, and you always will be." Emma accepted the pick with reverence, holding it carefully as if it were made of precious metal. "Thank you, Mr. Willie. I'll treasure it forever." After Emma and Maria left, Willie found himself alone in the common area with just a few members of the hospital staff. The morning had been emotionally intense, and he needed a moment to process everything that had happened. Dr. Thompson approached him quietly. "Mr. Nelson, I hope you know what a difference you made here today. Not just for the children, but for all of us. Watching you interact with our patients reminded us why we chose to work in pediatric medicine." Willie nodded thoughtfully. "Doc, I came here thinking I was going to give these kids a little music to brighten their day. Instead, they gave me something much more valuable. They reminded me what music is really for. It's not about fame or success or even talent, really. It's about connection, about sharing our humanity with each other. Sarah Martinez joined the conversation, her voice filled with emotion. Mr. Nelson, in all my years as a pediatric nurse, I've never seen anything like what happened here today. These children opened up in ways I've never witnessed before. They sang, they laughed, they shared their fears and hopes. It was like music gave them permission to be completely themselves. Lisa Chen was still taking notes, trying to capture the therapeutic significance of the morning. From a music therapy perspective, she said, what you accomplished here was remarkable. You created a safe space where children could express themselves authentically, work through emotions collaboratively, and experience joy in the midst of challenging circumstances. This session will influence how I approach my work for years to come. Willie felt humbled by their professional assessment of his simple desire to share music with sick children. I appreciate that, but honestly, I didn't do anything special. I just showed up with my guitar and tried to meet these kids where they were. They did all the real work, the courage, the openness, the creativity. Patricia Williams, the volunteer coordinator, had returned to the common area as Willie was preparing to leave. Mr. Nelson, she said, I want to apologize again for not recognizing who you were when you called. If we had known... Willie held up his hand with a gentle smile. Patricia, please don't apologize. The fact that you treated me like any other volunteer who wanted to help was exactly what made this morning so special. There were no expectations, no pressure, no agenda, except making music with these kids. That's how it should be. As Willie carefully placed Trigger back in its case, he reflected on the morning's experiences. The guitar now bore the signatures of a dozen young patients, each name representing a story of courage and hope. These signatures would join the hundreds of others from fellow musicians, friends, and fans who had marked important moments in his musical journey. But somehow, these children's names felt different, more precious, more meaningful. You know, Willie said to the small group of hospital staff who had gathered to see him off, I've played for presidents and kings, in sold-out stadiums and famous concert halls. But I don't think I've ever given a more important performance than the one I gave here today. Dr. Thompson smiled at Willie's assessment. Mr. Nelson, I think I speak for everyone here when I say that the performance you gave was remarkable not because of your fame or your musical skill, though those are considerable, but because of your genuine care for these children. You saw them as complete human beings, not just patients to be pitied. As Willie prepared to leave, he made one final gesture that would become part of hospital legend. He opened his guitar case one more time and removed a spare set of strings. Sarah, he said, handing the strings to the head nurse, I want you to have these. Maybe someday when the hospital gets a guitar for the music therapy program, you can put these strings on it. That way, a little bit of today's music will always be here. Sarah Martinez accepted the strings with tears in her eyes. Mr. Nelson, we'll make sure these strings are put to good use. And we'll make sure every child who plays that guitar knows where these strings came from and what they represent. Willie nodded his satisfaction. Good. Music should always have stories behind it. As Willie walked toward the elevator that would take him back to the lobby, he was accompanied by Dr. Thompson and Sarah Martinez. The halls of the pediatric ward seemed different now, not just a medical facility, but a place where something magical had occurred. Will you come back? Sarah asked as they reached the elevator. Not as Willie Nelson, necessarily, but as Bill Walker, The musician who came to share songs with our kids? Willie considered the question seriously. You know, Sarah, I think I will. Maybe not right away. These kids need time to process today's experience, and they need to know that their lives and their healing don't depend on celebrity visits. But yes, I'd like to come back sometime and see how everyone's doing. The elevator arrived, and as Willie stepped inside, Dr. Thompson called out one final comment. Mr. Nelson, thank you for reminding us why we became healers in the first place. It's not just about treating diseases. It's about caring for the whole person, including their need for joy and connection and hope. Willie waved as the elevator doors closed. That's what music's for, Doc. Healing the parts of us that medicine can't always reach. As the elevator descended toward the lobby, Willie felt a profound sense of completion. The morning had been everything he had hoped for and more. He had connected with children who needed to know they weren't alone in their struggles. He had shared the gift of music in its purest form, not as performance, but as communion. And he had been reminded of the fundamental truth that had guided his entire career. Music matters most when it serves love. The lobby was busier now than it had been when Willie arrived that morning. Families came and went, some arriving with worried faces, others leaving with expressions of relief or determination. The cycle of hospital life continued, but Willie knew that on the third floor, in the pediatric ward, something had changed. A group of children and their families and their caregivers had shared an experience that would stay with them forever. Willie approached the reception desk, where Jennifer Clark was still coordinating the day's activities. She looked up with the same professional smile she had given him hours earlier, but now it was tinged with awe and gratitude. "Mr. Nelson," she said, "word has spread throughout the hospital about what you did up there today. I want you to know that you've touched more lives than just the children you sang with. Everyone who works here feels inspired by your visit." Willie shook her hand warmly. "Jennifer, it was my privilege. Those kids taught me more about courage and resilience than I could ever teach them about music." As Willie walked through the lobby toward the exit, he noticed that several people recognized him now. Word of his presence had inevitably spread, and some staff members and visitors were pointing and whispering. But Willie maintained his focus on the exit, not out of unfriendliness, but out of respect for the privacy of the families who were dealing with their own medical crises and didn't need the distraction of celebrity attention. The autumn air felt crisp and clean as Willie stepped out of the hospital into the parking lot. The sun was higher now, approaching midday, and the leaves on the oak trees seemed more golden than they had been when he arrived. The world looked the same, but Willie felt changed by his experience. As he walked toward his pickup truck, Willie reflected on the individual children he had met and the impact they had made on him. Emma Rodriguez, with her wisdom beyond her years and her courage in facing her fears. Marcus Williams, with his humor and honesty about living with chronic illness. Ashley Thompson, with her deep understanding of music's power to heal and her determination to share that gift with others. Jacob Martinez, with his poetry and his willingness to be vulnerable in his art. Tyler Johnson, with his demonstration that communication transcends words. Lily Patterson, with her 4-year-old joy and enthusiasm. Sophia Blake, with her resilience in recovery and her determination to learn guitar. Each child had given him something precious, a reminder of why music mattered, why human connection was essential, why hope was worth maintaining even in the darkest circumstances. They had reminded him that fame and success were secondary to the fundamental human need to be seen, heard, and valued. Willie climbed into his truck and sat quietly for a moment before starting the engine. In the distance, he could see the windows of the third floor where he had spent the morning. He couldn't see into the individual rooms, but he knew that behind those windows, Children were continuing their battles with illness, fortified perhaps by the memory of a morning filled with music and friendship. He pulled out his phone and dialed his longtime manager and friend. When the call connected, Willie spoke without preamble. "I want you to set up a fund," he said. "A music therapy fund for children's hospitals. Not just here in Austin, but anywhere kids are fighting to get well and could use some music to help them through." "Willie, that's a beautiful idea," came the reply. "What made you think of it?" Willie smiled, thinking of Emma Rodriguez carefully writing her name on trigger, of Marcus Williams asking profound questions about music's healing power, of Ashley Thompson understanding songs better than people twice her age. "I spent the morning with some teachers," Willie said. "They reminded me what music is really for." As Willie started his truck and prepared to leave the hospital parking lot, he made a mental promise to the children he had met. He would remember each of them, not as patients or recipients of charity, but as individuals who had enriched his life immeasurably. He would carry their stories with him. Their courage would inspire his future music, and their friendship would remain a treasure for the rest of his days. The truck pulled out of the parking lot and onto the Austin streets, but part of Willie Nelson would always remain in that hospital common area, singing "You Are My Sunshine" with children who had shown him that the brightest light often shines in the darkest places. Back in the pediatric ward, the children were settling back into their routines, but the atmosphere remained transformed. In Emma Rodriguez's room, she was showing the guitar pick Willie had given her to every nurse and doctor who entered. In Marcus Williams's room, he was telling his father about the song they had written together and insisting that they needed to find a way to record it. Ashley Thompson was in her room writing in her journal about the morning's experience and planning how she would bring music to other young patients when she recovered. The music therapy room had gained new significance, and Lisa Chen was already planning how to incorporate the lessons of Willie's visit into her regular sessions. The collaborative songwriting approach, the emphasis on individual expression within a group setting, and the focus on emotional authenticity would all become permanent parts of her practice. Dr. Thompson was making his afternoon rounds with renewed energy, humming "Friends in the Music" under his breath, and finding himself more attuned to his patients' emotional needs alongside their medical ones. Sarah Martinez was coordinating with Patricia Williams to ensure that Willie's spare guitar strings would indeed be put on the hospital's guitar, and that every child who played it would know the story behind those strings. The morning's magic had ended, but its impact would ripple outward in ways that Willie would never fully know. Children would remember that a famous musician had seen them as important enough to spend time with, not because they were sick, but because they were human beings worthy of music and friendship. Parents would remember that even in the darkest times, joy was still possible. Medical staff would remember that healing involved more than just treating diseases. It involved nurturing the human spirit. And somewhere in Austin, an 89-year-old music legend was driving home with a heart full of gratitude for the reminder that the most important audiences are often the smallest ones, and that the most meaningful music is always the songs we create together. The hospital returned to its regular rhythms, but on the third-floor pediatric ward, something fundamental had changed. In the common area where children gathered for activities and therapy, there was now a framed copy of the lyrics to "Friends in the Music," signed by every child who had participated in its creation. Next to it hung a photograph that one of the nurses had taken. Willie Nelson sitting on the floor with his guitar, surrounded by children of all ages, all of them singing together with expressions of pure joy. The photograph bore a simple caption: "Music heals what medicine cannot touch." And in hospitals across the country, thanks to Willie's phone call in the parking lot, other children would soon discover that they too had friends in the music, and that even in the scariest places, Sunshine could always be found in the voices of people who cared enough to sing together. The story of Willie Nelson's disguised visit to Dell Children's Medical Center would become legend within the hospital walls, passed down from one generation of staff to the next, always with the same message. Sometimes the most extraordinary gifts come in the most ordinary packages, and the most important music is the song that says, "You are not alone." As autumn turned to winter and winter gave way to spring, the children who had shared that magical morning would carry its memory with them through treatments and recovery, through setbacks and triumphs. Some would grow up to become musicians themselves, inspired by the morning they spent creating songs with a legend. Others would find different ways to bring healing and hope to the world. But all of them would remember the lesson Willie Nelson taught them, that music, at its heart, is about connection, and that everyone has a song worth singing. And in a small corner of country music history, there would always be the story of the morning when Willie Nelson put aside his fame and simply became Bill Walker, a guy with a guitar who wanted to make music with some new friends. It was, perhaps, one of the most important performances of his legendary career, not because of the size of the audience or the grandeur of the venue, but because it reminded everyone present of the fundamental truth that the best music is always the song that says, "I see you, I hear you, and you matter." The echo of that morning's music would continue to resonate through the halls of Dell Children's Medical Center for years to come, a testament to the power of human connection and the healing magic that happens when we choose to share our gifts, not for recognition or reward, but simply out of love.